What matters are the fears and thoughts we usually keep hidden. Disordinati is where people strip back the layers.
Okay, we're here today with Shelly Cole. Hello, Shelly. It's lovely to have you here. You're best known as Madeline from Gilmore Girls, and since then you've stepped away from Hollywood and you've built a deeply meaningful life working with young people and also in education. So you've done so much in both of these worlds. And let's start maybe from Gilmore Girls, which has been such a milestone for so many people, both culturally and a comfort show for me as well. So when you were working on Gilmore Girls, what did your day-to-day life look like at the time, both on set and outside of it?
Uh, while I worked on Gilmore Girls, that was for like 3.5 years, basically. I did the bulk of the episodes in seasons 1, 2, and 3, and then I did 2 in season 4, the last being um, the spring break episode, girls in bikinis and boys doing the twist, or boys in doing the twist and girls in bikinis. Anyway, which I think is a pretty iconic episode, and I'm so proud to have been part of that. And also, I'm really, I think it's very cool that was my last episode. I knew it was going to be my last episode, and I thought it was a really great send-off from my life there. But while I was working, Gilmore Girls was my first big job. It was kind of like my break. And it helped launch my ability to do lots of other guest starring episodes in other series. And also, I did a couple of movies, several movies, two during my time on Gilmore Girls. One of them was this movie by Terry Zwigoff, I think.
Mhm.
Pretty well-known director, called Art School Confidential. And that was a really, really fun experience. And the second one I did was a movie called Pray for Rock and Roll, where I was the drummer in an all-girl band. And I was playing one of the lead roles. A lot of dramatic stuff. Had to learn how to play the drums. And so during my time filming Gilmore Girls, I was able to, because I wasn't in every episode, I'm really grateful that I was able to do so much other work while I was doing Gilmore Girls. And it worked. The only time it didn't work out was one time. Um, and I booked a TV series, like just an episode of a TV series. I think it was CSI New York or something like that.
Yeah.
One of the days overlapped, and it was just one day. They were just using me one day on Gilmore Girls, so that was the only episode that I wasn't in, that they had requested me for. That, like, Matt and that Louise. You'll notice that I don't even know the name of the episode, but Louise is in that episode, but
Yeah.
Madeline is not. Um, anyway, so it allowed me time to do all that stuff. But and in the meantime, I'm also holding down a day job, where I was very close with the man who owned the shop that I worked at. I
Mhm.
worked did basically accounting, and he was so flexible. Before I even got my first job, I said, I'm an actor, so, like, if I have to leave, I gotta
Yeah.
leave. And he said, that's
Yeah.
fine, don't worry about it, as long as you get your work done here and there. I'm totally fine with that. And so I would leave for auditions, and then I would leave for working on Gilmore Girls and these other shows. So I had a pretty busy life. And yeah, so that's basically all that in a nutshell.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds amazing and it's so exciting, and I love the fact that you weren't doing just that. In a way, you were experiencing other things and building other skills for your life. And the last part that you mentioned made me think. I don't know if you know Friends at all. Probably yes. When Joy, works in the coffee place, and Gunther is sort of upset that he leaves for auditioning. So I think it's really cool of your
Yeah.
former boss to allow to go and do auditioning. And at that point in your career, what were your hopes or expectations for the future? Did you see acting back then as a long-term path?
I did. I sort of did. Um, I Let me think about this for a second. I didn't really know. I mean, I come from the life that I come from. I don't have family. My father was very ill for a long time with bipolar one, which is a pretty wicked mental disorder, a mental and emotional disorder. And I spent a lot of my time having to manage him, and because I was the only one that was there to help do that. And that was very difficult. And so from the time I was just a little girl, I never had expectations about I want to grow up and I want to get married and have children and a house with a picket fence and a job and be a teacher or all that stuff. I never had those career life aspirations. I just assumed that I would be wandering through life for the rest of my life. And then I stumbled upon acting, went to LA. I got really lucky. I think somewhere along the way, I earned some pretty darn good karma. And I just, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just knew it was what I was doing at the moment was working, and so I kept doing that. And it wasn't until this TV show NCIS,
Mm-hmm.
um, they were casting, and I was going through the end of my father's life. He died in 2004, and so I went through all of that during my late 20s and early 30s. And when and during that time, I was having panic attacks, really bad panic attacks.
Yeah.
I've had them since I was 5 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And um, and I auditioned for the pilot episode of NCIS to play the character Abby,
Mm-hmm.
who was the punk rock girl with that, did the
Mm.
forensic stuff in the lab.
Yeah.
And it got down to the point where it was between me and the girl Polly Perrette, who eventually got cast. On the day, I had a suspicion that I was the favorite,
Mm-hmm.
but I can't guarantee that. But on the day that I'm supposed to really take that next step,
Mm-hmm.
I had a panic attack and I backed out.
Yeah.
And the creator of the show, Don Belisario, called my agent and said, "Are you crazy? Blah, 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 blah,
Yeah.
blah," which told me that I was really wanted for that show. But I
Mm-hmm.
realized that what that would turn like, I realized that I, I didn't really want that.
Yeah.
I mean, I never have to worry about money for the rest of my life, but I realized that I didn't really want
Mm-hmm.
that. God, how boring to have to say the same crap over
Yes.
and over and over again for years. I mean, that show's still on.
Yeah.
She
It's a
eventually
lot.
quit. Yeah, and I thought I don't want that. And I
Mm-hmm.
started to realize that I don't from the child life that I came from, I there was no certainty. I had
Mm-hmm.
no stability and I had no real foundation. So I So having the kind of instability in a career where
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure where my next job is going to come from, and and an actor's constantly, looking for their next job, whoever, no matter how big, or small time the actor is, that is the actor's basically nightmare. You just
Mm-hmm.
constantly
Yeah.
searching for your next job. And I realized that I didn't want my life to have to rest in a place of just
Mm-hmm.
constant instability. And it wasn't safe for me to develop as a person. And so right around 2009 or so, I realized that I just didn't want this life anymore.
Yeah.
And and I hooked up, like I connected with a guy that I had gone to high school with that was
Mm.
my boyfriend in high school. He was such a jerk.
Oh no.
But I thought, oh, he's better. Maybe he's better. And he lived in Denver, Colorado. And so in
Oh wow.
2010,
Okay.
I decided to, take the chance and move to Denver and just leave acting
Yeah.
behind. And the guy turned out to still be a jerk. So
Yeah.
I stayed with him for a while and then I got out of the relationship, but it brought me here.
Yeah.
And I knew that when I moved here, what I wanted to do was coach acting. So I could stay in acting, but not have to, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I could coach youth,
Mm-hmm.
kids. And so I stumbled into that and that worked out for me. That happened very quickly. And I had really great success with that. But it's, when you teach young actors, you're only teaching them at night because they go to school and
Yeah.
stuff. And so my days were kind of empty.
Yeah.
And I started substitute teaching at a school and started to realize, and it wasn't in the special ed department specifically, I was just substituting,
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
school.
Yeah.
And after a couple of years of this, I realized that I really liked
Hmm.
doing work with the special needs kids.
Yeah.
And so I said, "Hey, would you guys want, me to be a full-time, sports
Hmm.
specialist in the
Yeah.
sped department?" And they said, "Yeah, you don't even have to interview. You're in."
Yeah.
So that was great. And so I gave up coaching all but one night a week. So I still coach one night a week at the studio. And now I am, so now I, live
Yeah.
my life as a sports specialist. So
That's incredible. First of all, that, there's always the one jerk that leads us to, move countries. I've done it many times, unfortunately, but in some ways it works out. I always
yeah,
believe there is a reason why you do things. Um, and maybe that was, a means to get to that
yeah,
place.
absolutely.
So it's really beautiful. And I was wondering because you mentioned that you initially you wanted to contribute to education in general, and then you felt like a drive towards special education. Do you think that was also connected to how you lived your childhood, like the idea that you needed to be there for someone that needed you in a way?
That is a really astute question on your part, because that's part of the reason why I wanted to coach acting to students. And I took my coaching to youth,
Yeah.
and I took my coaching to a level of connection,
Hmm.
and and part of my work wasn't just coaching
Yeah.
scenes or monologues,
Hmm.
but it was, the additional aspect of it was that I felt like
Yeah.
I have been a very strong mentor, and helped, lead by example, being able to show emotions and talk about emotions, and share parts of myself in order to hopefully encourage, youth
Yeah.
to to be to talk about it, because emotions weren't really talked about, really,
Hmm.
in past generations. And when my father was diagnosed with bipolar 1, it was like
Hmm.
just getting a doctor to just diagnose him was
Yeah.
so difficult. This was back in the 80s, and early 90s. And I feel like it's a really important message to send, that it's not just okay to talk about your feelings, but I encourage it because it helps not only you get it out, but it also helps other people connect with you.
Yes.
And um and and so, yeah, so when I moved full time into working, with special needs kids, I definitely felt like it was my ability to give in a way that serves me best. I'm by nature,
Hmm.
I am very much an acts of service kind of
Yeah.
person. That's how I
Yeah.
show my love just into the world,
Mhm.
acts of service, nurturing. And so that really has fulfilled me a lot. And I feel like I've done some really good work, not just with, the school, but also with the young actors that I've worked with. And it's meaningful. And I have an acting club after school, for at our school. I have an acting club, and then I, teach at the studio uh, a different night of the week for teenagers. But yeah,
Yeah, that's so special what you said about being able to not just create a space where people feel welcome to share their emotions, but also the idea that if you share your own vulnerabilities, there is a power in it, in feeling connected and part of the same thing, part of the same boat in reality. And I was wondering if acting in a way helped you with that. I always imagine actors have to be inside the person that they are portraying, and so they have to really go deep into their own emotions to feel what the characters may have felt in that moment. And I was wondering if maybe these two side of your life go together in a way or are connected.
I think, you know, different actors have different methods of giving a performance. I personally connect with I am able to connect into my emotions, and so Gilmore Girls is not really a good example
Mhm. Yeah.
of because Gilmore Girls was very light,
Yeah.
especially, I mean, the show wasn't necessarily light, but
Yeah.
Madeline was very light,
Yeah.
and and so I didn't have to do a lot of deep
Mhm.
diving into my emotions, but one of the blessings of being able to do all of these other guest
Mhm.
starring
Yeah.
roles on like Cold Case and CSI and all kinds of stuff. I
Mhm.
was able to really uh, connect to that dark
Mm.
place in me, and it was very cathartic for me. And one of my best roles I think I've ever done was this movie, the rock and roll movie, Pray for Rock and Roll. I got to do a lot of stuff,
Mm.
like emotionally speaking. And I also learned how to play the drums, and I will honestly say that I do rock.
It's really
Um,
cool.
I worked,
Yeah.
I worked really hard for that. I worked really, really hard. And so yeah, you know, not all actors use like the personal method, but I encourage it because I think it helps get some of that stuff out. And that's what I brought into the acting classes that I did and that I do, is that sometimes I'll see something in a person and realize I think they're struggling with this. I'm
Mhm.
gonna just give them this scene and
Mhm.
see if it, like, you know,
Move
rattles the cage
something.
a little bit, anything like that. And so yeah, I definitely use hold on. I definitely yeah, I use it as a catharsis.
Yeah. That's really cool, especially the drums part. Every time I hear someone say, you know, that they play the drums, it's just immediately very cool. So Los Angeles, per se, because you mentioned it, has a very, you know, first from someone who lives in Europe, and you hear Los Angeles, Hollywood, it does have this fascination, no? Like you think it's really a place where artists are meeting together, they're making art, and then there is also the glamorous side of it. And I imagine that also living Los Angeles has been a big life change. What did that transition to Colorado give you that you felt you were missing before?
It was really scary at first to leave Los Angeles because I had built a life there for almost 14
Mhm.
years, and I had a lot of friends there, and I was really comfortable in my apartment,
Mhm.
and I was I was comfortable.
Mm.
Um, but I when I look back on leaving Los Angeles and also the thought of living there again, I think, God, no, I can't imagine living a life in Los Angeles. Not anymore. It's just way too much and too
Mhm.
hectic. And for God's sake, the sun, can you just go away? I mean, I love having four seasons. Yeah, I like Denver. I've created a really nice, strong community for myself and created good relationships and the work, and I love the seasons and
Yeah.
yeah, I'm happy here. At first it was hard, but it wasn't very long after when I would go back and visit and drive through like Koreatown with my best friend Michael,
Mm.
thinking,
You. No.
live here anymore, man. Not just Koreatown, but all over the place. And yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine. I visited it once for one summer. I spent the summer in California for a month because I was with one of, you know, my ex-boyfriends, and it felt a lot. It's all fancy and cool when you watch it on movies, I guess, and TV series, especially if you're not from there. But then to live there, I think it's a whole other experience. Um, when we think about the character of Madeline, to go back to her, she became part of such a beloved show. Did that experience change how you felt about the industry while you were still in it? Because by this at the time, I can imagine the industry already was quite particular. It's not necessarily the most welcoming industry that you can imagine. Was playing that character and being part of that wholesome show made you feel like different compared to maybe other colleagues or friends who were playing characters in yeah, different shows?
It was a really hard show to do because of the hours,
Hmm.
and because Amy was insistent that we say every single word exactly the way it's written, and with really, really long paragraphs of dialogue that are tongue twisting, and
Hmm.
having to have it exactly right. It created very, very long, stressful hours
Hmm.
on the set. The crew was stressed out, the cast was stressed out. Like it was hard. It was really hard. Um, one of the benefits that I got to experience was, they did the pilot episode, and then starting in episode one, I'm in episode one, and I'm littered throughout the entire first 3 years. But it's basically, it's the equivalent of half of all of the episodes. And being part of that uh, community and that machine from the very, very start
Hmm.
allowed me to have it become much like a family. And
Hmm.
so it became a sense of stability in my life that I had longed
Hmm.
for. Um, and the whenever I would have any lengthy dialogue, I was so stressed about it because you got to get it right. Uh, and so, but anyway, it was a lot of things. It was very, very stressful, very long hours, a lot of grumpy people from time to time. From
And
time
not
to time.
enough coffee.
Well, only so much coffee that I could drink.
So much.
I didn't like to hang out by craft service. I didn't like to continue to drink coffee. I just um I like to be, I always like to be my own stand-in. I and whatever. Anyway, so I got the benefits of it, but it was also very, very stressful and
Mhm.
very difficult.
Yeah, I can imagine. It's a show that it has gone for so many years. So there must have been so much commitment and pressure to do it right and satisfy everyone's expectations. And then you shifted towards, you mentioned special education. Working in special education, what parts of that role feel most meaningful to you, and how does it compare to the fulfillment you got from acting and empathizing with other people's, troubles and emotions? Because I see them all connected in a way.
Well, I've always been very, very in touch with my emotions, and sometimes that can be
Mhm.
like a problem
Mm.
because sometimes I can't control my emotions, or I've struggled with that in the past, and and or taking things personally, or just not being able to control my reaction to things. But I find that in special education, my I it's I'm required
Mhm.
to be able to stay in check, and that's been a struggle. Not a horrible struggle, but I've learned a lot. And so, for instance, this year is my third year full time, and the way I show up
Mhm.
is way different than when I showed up,
Mhm.
3 years ago.
Mhm.
um, Wanting to solve all the problems and put out all the fires, and like, walking, 18,000 steps a day, and,
Okay.
etc. And I've learned how to just sort of take a step back and let go and start not have the need to control everything all the time. I, there's really not a lot of like in the world of acting, there's much less need to feel empathy for
Mhm.
like everyone around you.
Mhm.
And it's more feeling empathy for your character.
Yeah.
That said, I think I've always been a very empathetic person,
Mhm.
um, and have always tried to help wherever I can lend a hand.
Yeah. I really appreciate you sharing your journey with emotions because I obviously haven't had your same experience with the childhood, but I'm an eldest daughter, and I think we always want to, anticipate needs and be in control of everyone's, making sure that everyone is okay, and that obviously has a big impact also on how you manage your own emotions. So it's quite a big deal when you then have to deal with someone in special education and you have to have it together for that person in that moment. Um, which is quite empowering for the both of you in that situation. Um, how do you see all of your experiences connecting? And this podcast always, I always like to think that we are a bit, even if we're adults now, we are a bit the children that we used to be in a way. And if you look back at the girl that you were before, how do you see what is happening now connecting, to your past you? And yeah.
Well, life is obviously life's a journey, and on that journey, we take what we learned and hopefully apply it to the future and continue to grow as people. I think I've done a pretty good job of that. I could have chosen a lot of different paths with the darkness I experienced as a
Yeah.
child. And thankfully, I chose paths that I feel have led me I feel have led me to um, continue to grow in my late 20s and mid to late 20s and early 30s. I was in some, I was going through a lot of darkness
Mm.
and fear, abandonment, trying to navigate all of that stuff and navigate my father and his illness. And I've gotten to a point in my life now where nothing's perfect, obviously,
Yeah.
but I definitely like myself. And
Mm.
I feel like I've dealt with a lot of those struggles
Yeah.
and have been able to leave them in my rearview mirror, rather than, still continually trying to fight those demons.
Yeah.
And I don't think that I could probably have done the job that I do now or the work that I do now uh, while I was there,
Yeah.
you know. And I think that was timing was great for all of that like angst and fear
Yeah.
because I was able to use acting as a way to work through it. And obviously I'll always have stuff to work through, but the work that I do now has benefited from my ability to grow past all of that angst. And I mean, obviously we're always learning and trying to
Mm.
I'm always trying to better myself.
Mhm.
And I think, I'll always carry some sort of burden. Sometimes it feels heavier and sometimes it feels lighter.
Yeah.
Um, Being able to focus on others
Mhm.
and on work with others definitely helps take the focus off
Mhm.
me, and allows me to like give my focus on helping, someone
Mhm.
else. So I think it all comes together.
Mm. It's beautiful how we, in a way, for each chapter of our life, there is a version of ourselves. And in that comes also different versions of the complex world of emotions that we have in our head and that we feel in our heart. And I think it's just beautiful to be able to experience all of these versions of ourselves, and probably being surrounded by the right people also helps a lot. Having good encounters with people that can guide you and direct you. So I was wondering if you feel like obviously you are impacting positively all the people that you've worked with, both coaching in acting and special education. And I was wondering if there is one experience that stayed with you, a particular connection in your life that you feel like, yeah, stayed with you and sort of had an important meaning to you as a person.
This was early on when I was coaching acting. Um, I remember one of my students coming to me and saying that she was really struggling with thoughts of suicide, and realizing that, I mean, first of all, when a student comes and addresses this topic,
Yeah.
as a someone who works with any youth, it's my responsibility to notify parents
Mhm.
and make sure that the kid's in a safe place. But I she's still with us and she never took her life. But I
Mhm.
started to realize that, there's other kids that feel this way as well. And so our as a class, as an acting class, we decided to go through the whole process of making a suicide prevention video. And they're all in it. It's one of those, um, like with the white cards, and like everyone tells a
Yeah.
couple of girls were brave enough to tell their stories, and we wrote them out on the white cards. And then other kids held up, white whatever, um, with facts and all kinds of stuff. And we put it to this really, really sweet song. And and working on it with my student one of my students at the time, who wasn't struggling with suicide, but it was really fun to do this and work arduously with her,
Mhm.
putting it all together. That was an experience in my professional life, beyond acting, my life in Los Angeles, that was profound, and it has very much stayed with me,
Yeah.
um, viscerally.
Yeah. This is really beautiful. And I always think that you only need one person to sort of believe in you, or, just be aware of your existence, and it can change everything. And so it's really amazing what you do. There is also this pressure, and this is my last question, to, be perfect, or if you've invested a lot of your time, energy, and personality in achieving something. And let's take, for instance, the example of you reaching, the acting scene in Hollywood, that you're not supposed to leave that. And I was wondering if you have any advice for people who are experiencing that, who are doing what they're supposed to do, or what, other people expect them, expect for them this is the right path, but in reality they feel like, well, I haven't really, I don't feel satisfied. This is not what I'm meant to be doing on this earth, and I want to change it. What is your advice for people, especially young people?
I mean, that's a very loaded question, and I don't feel like I am qualified to answer that question. But but my best effort in order to answer that question is to say, um, you know, if I'm on a path that doesn't feel right, or maybe feels destructive, or maybe feels like I'm just like dog paddling and I don't want to be there, and there is something that could make me just as happy somewhere else,
Mhm.
I I think, if the ship is sinking, find a new one.
Yeah.
And that's okay. Starting over and having the courage to
Mhm.
start over, um, and to keep searching for what's going to make me happy. I think having the courage, to know when something doesn't feel right, and
Yeah.
to make the choice to change or to seek something else. I think that's very, very brave, and I encourage it big time. And I think that one of the things that we haven't really discussed much, or whatever, is having, I think, having a sense of humor.
Mm.
Um, I believe it or not, because we've talked about serious stuff, I'm a very funny person
Yeah.
sometimes, and I try really hard to bring my humor into the work
Yeah.
and into acting, coaching, all that stuff. I really try because I think, having that kind of levity in life and just being able to make people laugh or be with people and having, to be able to laugh, that's so, so important. And if something is really dragging me down and I haven't laughed in weeks and that says something. It
Yeah.
says a lot. It tells me that I'm I was living in Texas and going to college, and this was at the beginning of a really, really bad mountain of just peaks and valleys of sadness. And I was doing some drugs, and I had at least one more year, if not a little bit more, of college left. And I was just miserable. And I
Yeah.
thought, if I do not get out of Texas, I'm gonna it's not I'm
It's
not
not
going to have
looking good.
much
Yeah.
of a life. And I had one friend who did not live in Texas and he lived in Seattle, and I just said, screw it.
Mhm.
I am I just got on a plane and packed what I could, just left everything behind and started my life over. And that was very courageous,
Yeah.
very scary. And like it led me to acting,
Yeah.
led me to the life I have now. And I think being able to make a change, have the courage to like say, this isn't working. I'm going to try something else. And having reincarnations of
Yeah.
in life, I've had several.
Yeah.
And who knows that this may not, probably isn't my last one.
Hmm.
So, yeah, being able to have the courage to start over.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's my best advice
Hmm.
um, on that
It's good
question.
advice. It's good advice. I think the idea that identity is static, we should just abandon it because we can be whatever we want all the time. And as you said, pack your bags and try to find a different ship, a different group of people to hang out with, I think is really important. And I loved that you mentioned humor because I don't know. I feel like people who are able to laugh are also able to cry. In a way, it sort of is maybe the highest expression of love, and then love is, everything that we are and experiencing in life. So it's really important to celebrate humor as taking life lightly, but also and not take ourselves too seriously, I would say, but also take ourselves very seriously in a way and understand the depth of laughter and being genuine and just caring for each other and making sure that everyone is having a good time. To conclude on a very funny, light way, because you've been part of the Gilmore Girls family for so long, uh, what team are you on if you have to decide between Team Jess, Logan, and Dean? Because we always have to have this question at the end of every Gilmore Girls interview.
All right. Let me just tell you who I'm not. I'm not on team Logan.
Okay, perfect. Okay, good.
Um I I'm not on any team
No,
because I
okay.
I think they all have their flaws, which are fine,
Yeah.
but they all also like, I'm on team Rory. Choose yourself.
Yeah, okay, okay, that's a good answer.
Because ultimately these guys ended up like really thoroughly disappointing her.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
do we feel about the last moments of this something whatever year in the life?
Yes. That's not good. I didn't feel great about it, but yeah, that's
I
true.
think that's a result of Rory not choosing Team Rory.
Yes, yes. And men come and go, so you have to really choose yourself and make sure yeah.
Gonna see this? That's my puppy.
Oh,
I-
wow. That's my copy.
Where? Oh,
A different
uh,
kind of puppy.
yeah, awesome. Well, it was really a nice pleasure talking with you. You asked some really good questions, and
Thank you so much.
I think your audience is lucky to have you.
Oh, that really means a lot to me because I'm trying to also change my path. So hearing that means everything to me, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share all your journey with us. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Pleasure's mine.